Welcome to the Empathy Stories channel, where we explore the most powerful, life-changing moments of human connection. Today's story is one of pain, regret, and unexpected redemption. Meet Grace Morgan, a woman who overcame abandonment to become a beacon of hope. But when her estranged father, a wealthy businessman, reappears after years of silence, his shock at her success leads to a confrontation that neither of them could have imagined. Let's dive into this deeply emotional journey. The faint winter sun cast a pale light over Chicago as Grace Morgan opened her eyes, her heart racing with anticipation. Today was the day, a chance to redefine her life and expand her advocacy work for Beacon of Hope, the nonprofit she had poured her soul into. At 28, Grace had faced many challenges, but standing before a crowd in one of Chicago's largest convention centers would be her greatest test yet. She rose from bed. Glancing at the walls of the small room she shared with her adoptive sister, Hannah. They were adorned with family photos and clippings of community projects, a testament to the journey she had taken from a lost child to a driven social activist. The smell of coffee and pancakes drifted upstairs, drawing her down to the cozy kitchen where her adoptive parents, Eleanor and Samuel Morgan, were waiting. "Big day," Samuel said with a knowing smile as he folded his newspaper. "Nervous?" "A little," Grace admitted, accepting a cup of coffee from Eleanor. Her mother placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Just remember why you're doing this," Eleanor said gently. Grace nodded, her thoughts drifting to her own childhood. At 8 years old, she'd been abandoned at an orphanage, clutching a worn teddy bear as she watched her father drive away. Days turned to weeks, and he never returned. It was Samuel and Eleanor who found her months later, wandering scared and alone. They opened their hearts to her, giving her a home, love, and a reason to believe in second chances. "Grace!" Hannah's voice jolted her back to the present. "You'll be late." Quickly finishing her coffee, Grace kissed her family goodbye and got ready. In a navy blazer and white blouse, she stood before the mirror, steadying herself. "You can do this," she whispered, determination gleaming in her striking blue eyes. The subway ride to the convention center was packed, but Grace used the time to mentally rehearse her speech. Her focus wasn't on impressing the audience with statistics. It was about sharing real stories of resilience and hope. She thought of the children she had worked with, each one a reminder of why she dedicated herself to Beacon of Hope. When she arrived at the bustling convention center, a young assistant named Madison greeted her. "Ms. Morgan, welcome. Your speech is one of the most anticipated today." Grace smiled nervously. "I'll do my best." Madison led her through the maze of corridors to the speaker's lounge. The energy in the room was electric, but Grace stayed focused, reflecting on the lives she hoped to impact. As her turn approached, she steadied herself, thinking of her family and the children she fought for every day. The auditorium was packed as she walked onto the stage, the spotlight bright against her skin. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice clear and steady. "My name is Grace Morgan, and I'm here to talk about second chances, the power of love, and how each of us can change a child's life." She shared her story of abandonment, adoption, and the work she did with Beacon of Hope. Her voice wavered with emotion as she recounted her struggles, but grew stronger as she spoke of triumphs. "We can't change the past, but we can choose to rewrite the future," she said. "Every child deserves someone who believes in them." The audience was captivated, their expressions a mix of tears and admiration. But in the very back row, one man sat frozen. Andrew Weston, a wealthy and powerful businessman, had come to the conference for networking, not inspiration. Yet, as he listened to Grace, he realized the woman on stage was the daughter he had abandoned 20 years ago. The applause echoed through the auditorium as Grace stepped off the stage, her heart still racing from the speech. Backstage, Madison greeted her with a beaming smile. "Grace, that was incredible. Social media is already buzzing about your message." Grace managed a small smile, exhaustion setting in. "I'm glad it resonated," she said, though her thoughts were elsewhere. She had poured her heart into the speech, but the weight of it left her feeling drained. She texted Eleanor a quick update. It went well. Can't wait to tell you everything tonight. As Grace navigated the post-speech hustle, she remained unaware of the man sitting frozen in the back of the auditorium. Andrew Weston hadn't moved since the moment he realized who she was. His mind churned, replaying her words over and over. The memories he had long buried of leaving his young daughter at an orphanage. Convincing himself it was for the best came flooding back. Guilt twisted in his chest as he watched the strong, confident woman Grace had become. How had she survived without him? How had she risen so far? Back at the Beacon of Hope office, Grace's best friend and colleague Rachel Bennett was busy fielding calls and emails. Grace, you won't believe this, Rachel said over the phone as Grace made her way back to the city. Weston Enterprises just reached out. They're offering a major sponsorship. Grace frowned. Weston Enterprises? That's unexpected. They've never shown interest in social causes before. Rachel was ecstatic. It's huge. Grace, if this works out, we could expand statewide. Let's not jump in just yet, Grace said, her instincts tingling. I want to know why they're suddenly interested. Later that evening, Grace sat with Eleanor and Samuel, recounting her day. When she mentioned Weston Enterprises, Eleanor's brow furrowed. You've always trusted your instincts. Grace, if it doesn't feel right, dig deeper. The next morning, Grace woke to an unusual message. It was from an unknown number. Grace, this is Andrew Weston. I need to speak with you. It's urgent. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Weston, the CEO of the company offering to sponsor her nonprofit. Could it be a coincidence? She decided to meet him, but on her own terms. Later that day, she arrived at a quiet cafe, her stomach in knots. Sitting at a corner table was Andrew, impeccably dressed, but visibly uneasy. Grace approached cautiously, her emotions a mix of anger and curiosity. Grace, he said softly, standing to greet her. Thank you for coming. She didn't sit. Why are you contacting me? What do you want? Andrew sighed heavily, gesturing to the chair across from him. Please, sit. I owe you an explanation. Grace hesitated, but eventually Saturday her arms crossed defensively. Start talking. Andrew leaned forward, his voice filled with regret. I came to your speech yesterday. I didn't know it would be you. But when I saw you up there, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. Her eyes narrowed. Silent about what? He took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. I'm your father. Grace, I left you at that orphanage 20 years ago, and it was the biggest mistake of my life. The words hit her like a blow. She stared at him, her mind racing. You're lying, she said, her voice shaking. Why would you come back now? After all this time? I thought I was doing what was best for you, he said, his voice cracking. I was young, ambitious, and terrified. I convinced myself you'd have a better life without me. But I was wrong. I've regretted it every day since. Grace stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Regret doesn't erase what you did. You abandoned me. You left me to figure it all out on my own. I know, Andrew said, his eyes pleading, but I want to make things right. If you'll let me. The sponsorship, it's my way of helping, of giving back. Grace shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. You think throwing money in my nonprofit will fix everything? That's not how this works. She turned to leave, her chest tight with a mix of anger and hurt. Grace, please. Andrew called after her. I just want a chance to prove I'm not the man I was. She paused at the door, but didn't turn back. I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'm not ready to forget. That night, Grace sat in her room, staring at the message Andrew had sent earlier. Her emotions were a storm, anger, confusion, and an odd pang of curiosity. Could she face the man who had shaped her life by leaving it? Could she open a door she thought had been shut forever? The next morning, Grace woke with a heavy heart, her mind still swirling from the encounter with Andrew Weston. She had barely slept, replaying his words over and over. She wasn't sure if she felt more anger or confusion. Could someone who had walked away so easily from his own child truly deserve a second chance? At Beacon of Hope, Rachel greeted her with excitement, oblivious to Grace's turmoil. Weston Enterprises sent over the official sponsorship offer, she said, holding up a thick envelope. This could be a game changer. Grace. Grace forced a smile. Let's take our time reviewing it, she said, her tone cautious. She didn't share the truth with Rachel yet. She wasn't ready to open that door to anyone else. Later that afternoon, Grace received another message from Andrew. I understand if you're angry, but I'd like to meet again. There's so much more I need to explain. Against her better judgment, she agreed. This time, she chose a neutral, public spot in a quiet park, hoping it would make the conversation easier, or at least bearable. Andrew was already there when she arrived, sitting on a bench with his hands clasped. He stood as she approached, his face a mix of relief and apprehension. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice careful. Grace didn't bother with pleasantries. If you want me to listen, start with the truth. All of it. Andrew nodded, his shoulders slumping slightly. You deserve nothing less. He gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing, arms crossed defensively. He began speaking, his voice thick with emotion. I was in my 20s, just starting my career. Your mother, Laura, and I weren't married. And when she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I was ambitious, selfish, and terrified that having a child would ruin everything I'd worked for. So, when you were born, I convinced her that we couldn't give you the life you deserved. Grace's jaw tightened as she listened, the words stinging like fresh wounds. You abandoned me because I was inconvenient. Andrew flinched, but didn't deny it. Yes, I was a coward. I told myself you'd be better off without us. But that was a lie. I was protecting myself, not you. What about my mother? Grace asked, her voice icy. Did she agree to this? Andrew hesitated before answering. Laura didn't want to give you up. She loved you. But I pressured her. I told her it was the only way. And she eventually gave in. It's something we've both regretted every day since. Grace's anger simmered, but beneath it was a flicker of curiosity. And now? Why come back now? When I saw you on that stage. Grace, I realized how wrong I'd been, he said, his voice trembling. You've become this incredible woman despite everything I did. You deserve to know the truth. And I want to make amends, if you'll let me. She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. You think an apology will fix everything? That you can erase 20 years of pain with a few words? No, Andrew admitted. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to be part of your future, even if it's just in a small way. Grace's defenses wavered for a moment, but she quickly hardened herself. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. And I'm not sure I want to. Andrew nodded solemnly. I understand, but if you ever decide you're ready, I'll be here. She turned to leave, her emotions a storm of anger, sadness, and a faint glimmer of uncertainty. The following days were a whirlwind at Beacon of Hope. The media had picked up on Grace's powerful speech, bringing new attention and scrutiny to her nonprofit. Rachel buzzed with excitement over the influx of donations and partnership offers. But Grace remained preoccupied. That evening, as Grace prepared to leave the office, Rachel stopped her. You've been quiet all week. Is everything okay? Grace hesitated before replying. It's complicated. Rachel studied her for a moment before nodding. Whatever it is, just remember, you're not alone. Grace appreciated the sentiment, but knew this was something she had to process on her own. Days later, Grace received an unexpected call from her adoptive mother. Eleanor, sweetheart, there's someone here to see you. Eleanor said carefully. It's Laura Weston, Grace Franz. The name hitting her like a jolt. Her biological mother. She hadn't expected this. I'll be home soon, she said, her voice trembling. When she arrived at the Morgan house, Grace found Laura sitting in the living room, looking older than she'd imagined, but with an undeniable warmth in her eyes. Eleanor gave Grace an encouraging squeeze on the shoulder before leaving the two women alone. Grace, Laura began, her voice soft but filled with emotion. I know this is unexpected, but I needed to see you. Grace sat across from her, unsure what to say. Why now? She asked finally. Why, after all this time? Tears welled in Laura's eyes. I've wanted to reach out for years, but I didn't know how. When I saw your speech, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I made so many mistakes. Grace, letting you go was the hardest thing I've ever done, and I've regretted it every day since. Grace's anger softened slightly as she listened to Laura's raw honesty. Andrew told me he pressured you, she said, her tone more curious than accusatory. Laura nodded. He did. But I let him. I should have fought harder for you. And I didn't. For that, I'm so sorry. The two women talked for hours, sharing stories and tears. By the end of the night, Grace felt an unexpected sense of connection, though the wounds were still fresh. In the weeks that followed, Grace began to navigate her complicated feelings toward Andrew and Laura. She set firm boundaries, choosing to move forward on her terms. Slowly, she allowed them into her life, though she made it clear that forgiveness would take time. Through it all, her work at Beacon of Hope remained her anchor. The nonprofit thrived in the wake of her newfound visibility, and Grace poured herself into expanding their programs. Her story, though painful, became a source of inspiration for others. At a gala months later, Grace took the stage once more. This time, Andrew and Laura sat in the audience, their presence a quiet acknowledgement of the progress they had made. "We cannot change the past," Grace said, her voice steady, "but we can choose to rewrite our future. And in doing so, we can bring hope to those who need it most." The audience erupted into applause, and Grace felt a sense of peace she hadn't thought possible. Her journey was far from over, but for the first time, she believed in the power of second chances, not just for others, but for herself as well. Thank you for watching this powerful story of Grace's strength and the complex journey of forgiveness. It's a reminder that sometimes the people we've lost find their way back. But healing isn't always about reconciliation. It's about finding peace within ourselves. If you were moved by Grace's story, please like, share, and subscribe for more real, inspiring stories that show the true power of the human spirit. We appreciate your support here on Empathy Stories.